Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. We are very honored to have you all here today. Please take a second and look around to notice where the exit signs are. And also, there is no flash photography allowed. But that's just the only rules we've got today. The rest is you're going to be inspired, and we're going to start with our Chief Executive Officer of Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Please welcome Deborah Cullinan.
Hello. Hello. Welcome. Welcome. I am so very honored to be with all of you here today. Today, the 75th anniversary of Executive Order 9066 that resulted in the incarceration of more than 100,000 Japanese Americans. Today, February 19th, 2017, and we have been here before, and we have to do something about it. And this is why we at YBCA are so dedicated to our mission statement. Our mission is to generate culture that moves people. Culture, that set of things, the beliefs, the traditions, the values, the stories, we believe cultural movement precedes change. It is cultural movement that results in lasting change. And this is why we believe that art centers of all kinds must become citizen institutions, turning our resources outward and collaborating with the change makers, the institutions, and the people who are at the forefront of change. We believe it is time to reinvent the Contemporary Art Center. And how are we doing that? We start every year with a thing we call the YBCA 100. This is the list of the 100 people who are most inspiring to us as an institution. These are artists, these are change makers, they might be athletes, they might be scientists. They are the people that are shifting culture. We bring as many of those people as we can together in the form of a summit every year. This year's summit took place just a few days before the 2016 election. We had about 400 people. We had as many of our change makers, our YBCA 100 members as possible. We asked them to share with us, what are the questions that are keeping you up at night? What are the things that are causing you to do the work that you're doing in the world? We come out of that summit every year with a set of questions. At a last year's summit, the questions were, can we design freedom? What does equity look like? And why citizenship? We then shape the work of the institution around these questions, these poetic questions, these nuanced questions, the kinds of questions that can get us beyond polarizing binary conversations and that can bring us to something different. We do that in the form of art. We are an art center. We make visual art, performances, film programs, all kinds of things in response to those questions. We also do convenings like the one today that we're all here to enjoy. Again, in response to those questions. We do inquiry in the form of fellowship. We bring 30 people together in groups over the course of a year. We have probably 90 fellows right now working on these different questions. And then we incubate the best ideas. That might be art ideas. They might be an idea for a new startup, a new policy, a new relationship, some new civic collaboration. We also do civic coalition, and that is what we are here to do today with the ACLU of Northern California and with our partners, City Lights, booksellers, and publishers. So thank you to these two amazing institutions. These organizations understand that it is cultural movement that will help us pursue radical change, radical lasting change. The ACLU has for nearly 100 years been defending the rights of the people of the United States of America. The ACLU of Northern California was founded right here in San Francisco in 1934, and here we are. So these institutions come together because we understand that we need more than transactional wins. We need to change hearts and minds so that no one person, no one party under any circumstances can undermine or overturn our progress as the people of this country. And it is now, thank you, thank you. This is the role of the Cultural Center in this country. It is to be the place for people like you who want to be activated and who want to be part of change that will last for generations, so that we never again have to feel like many of us are feeling today, that we're going backward in time. I am so honored to be here with the ACLU, with City Lights, and it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Abdi Soltani, the Executive Director of the ACLU Northern California.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much. Wow. Well, let me just begin by thanking Deborah and the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts for opening this beautiful facility and bringing such incredible talent to this day. And let me thank also City Lights, our partner for decades, that's with us also. In this room, we have supporters of all three of our organizations. And I just want to begin by thanking those of you who are members and supporters of the ACLU, everyone in this room, both the stalwarts who've been with us for decades and the many, many, many new friends that we've gained since the November election. We are here to mark an anniversary, the 75th anniversary of the executive order that led to the incarceration of Japanese Americans. On this day, and after this election, and just weeks after this executive order of the Muslim ban, there is so much at stake in our understanding of our history and of understanding what is transpiring in people's lives right now. That's why you're here today, because there is so much at stake. Who can come here and who can stay? Who can be free and who will be behind bars? Who will live in health and who may die? Who will work? Who may go hungry? Who can worship freely and who can vote? Who we can love and who we are? Who can make the most intimate decisions about our lives, especially the lives of women? There is so much at stake. But there's even more at stake than what I just described, if that is possible. And what I'm talking about is that everything we're fighting for today is related to what our ancestors fought for and secured for us. And so the struggle today, what is at stake today, is not just our rights in our communities right now, but everything that came before us to give us the freedom and the rights we enjoy, and everything that follows from this day forward. Our founders were bold revolutionaries. They called for a revolution on this continent, and then they created a government of which the face of the earth had never seen anything like this before. And our founders had a few big ideas, bold ideas, ideas that are worth us repeating right now and for us to rally around. The first is they fought against corruption, the corruption of a monarchy and an oligarchy that used the power of the state to enrich the few. They fought for the idea of representation, that power is derived from the consent of the governed. They fought for an idea called the separation of powers, which separated the authority of the executive, the Congress, and the judiciary. They rallied around the idea of the rule of law, that no one is above the law and no one is below its protection. And with that, they created in our Constitution a Bill of Rights. And that Bill of Rights takes that idea of the rule of law and says every person is afforded the dignity of being a human being. Every person, citizen and non-citizen alike. Among these revolutionaries, there is one who I love greatly, and his writings especially, and that's Thomas Paine, who wrote the pamphlet Common Sense. He reflected in this essay, when he calls for a revolution, of a previous rebellion of the people of the colonies that failed. He reflects on their experience at that time, but also their numbers. And he said the following, quote, "We had experience, but wanted in numbers. And 40 or 50 years hence, we should have numbers, but without experience. Wherefore, the proper time between the two extremes is one in which we have a sufficiency of experience and a proper increase in our numbers. And that point in time," he said, "is right now." When I think about where we are today, I can tell you that we have experience. We have the experience of knowing representation and the rule of law and a Bill of Rights, and we have not forgotten that experience. We also have the experience of all of the movements that have taught us so much. And in addition to that experience, right now we also have numbers. We have numbers represented in all of the generations that make up this people and everyone of all walks of life. And we have seen those numbers in marches and at airports, and we've seen it rallying around this great country. So I speak to you now with that knowledge that we had revolutionaries and ancestors that preceded us. They found the right moment in time with adequate experience and numbers, and that time is also now. We have to rally with the same urgency that Thomas Paine called for the revolution that created this democracy in order to protect that democracy. That moment in time is right now. So I want to talk to you about my story. I am an accidental citizen of the United States of America. In this photo, I am the smallest person in the picture. You see there my two brothers and my mom, and somehow we don't have a picture at that time that also includes my dear father, who passed away a few years ago. In 1973, my mother and father were invited to come to the United States on a 6-month fellowship, the Eisenhower Fellowship, named for a former president and general of this country. My mom was pregnant at the time, early in the pregnancy, and she decided she'll go with my dad. How often do you have this opportunity to come to the United States? But she thought she would stay for just maybe 2 months and then go back to Iran. They left my 2 older brothers with my aunt and my grandmother, my mom and dad, my mom pregnant a few months, came to the United States. And boy, when you first come to this country, it truly is impressive. It's gleaming cities, it's growing industries, it's fruited plains, it's purple mountains, and the great diaspora of planet Earth that found its home here. And they fell in love with this country. They started driving, and I kid you not, they drove 30,000 miles. And they lost track of time on America's highways. 8 months into this pregnancy and about 5 months into this trip, my mom realized it's probably time to go back to Iran, where this child could be born with a community and in our own country. They were in Los Angeles at the time, staying with my father's brother, Reza. My mom goes to the doctor for a final checkup before she'll fly halfway across the country. The doctor takes one look at her and says, "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're too far in this pregnancy to fly. This child will be born right here in Los Angeles." And so I was born a citizen of the United States on this soil. We moved back to Iran and we lived there until I was about 8 years old. And after the Iranian Revolution and the Iran-Iraq War, my mom decided we needed to leave Iran. And so, a citizen of this country by birth, I returned to it as a child, as an immigrant. And on the first days that we landed in New York, I was able to stand at the foot of the Statue of Liberty. I was able to stand in this photo in the lobby of the Empire State Building. We moved within a couple of weeks to Boston, where I got to see the very boat in Boston Harbor that was the site of the original Tea Party. I was able to walk the Freedom Trail through the streets of Boston. And later in high school, I had this incredible opportunity to work on this beautiful farm on Monument Street in Concord, just a little ways down the road from where the first shots were fired in the American Revolutionary War. And on that farm, in the middle of it, was this giant tree. And in the heat of the summer, we would sit under the tree for shade. And I kid you not, that tree, it stood for as long as this republic has stood. And so this citizen by birth, this immigrant child, fell back in love with this country. I then had the opportunity to come to California for college, and it was in the early 1990s. Raise your hand if you lived in this state over those years. You've seen the playbook of fear before. You've seen the playbook of racial hatred and animosity, where crime and immigration were used by a governor in 1994 to win re-election. And that was the age that I was coming of age. And that's the point of my story as an adult, a story that we're going to come back to. That's me in a Boston Celtics t-shirt. So now I come to this question of the meaning of citizenship. In the days leading up through this entire election season, I've been thinking a lot about what is the meaning of my citizenship? What is its origin? What is its purpose? And so I come to this story of the meaning of citizenship with the reflection of our recent experience. The meaning of citizenship is something I thought about carefully throughout the election season, but it also came up when Barack Obama gave his farewell address. 3 times he invoked the theme of citizenship. He talked about how we've answered the call of citizenship for 240 years. He asked us to accept the responsibility of citizenship. And if you recall, at the end of his speech, he said, "I now return to the most important office in the land, the office of citizen." So reflecting on this question, it didn't take long before I was jolted out of reflection by another executive order, this time of President Trump. And this is the executive order of the Muslim ban. It came about 3 weeks ago. It revoked visas and it barred refugees. At the airports, some agents coerced people to give up legal permanent status in their green cards. But the executive order goes even deeper than that because it tries to close the door to future citizens. At that point, with this executive order, my life as an Iranian American was fused with my life as an ACLU director. They coalesced into one. My phone, my text messages, my emails were flying with countless people contacting me from our family, from the people we know, asking for help from the ACLU. And some of those people are in the room today. Those conversations were gut-wrenching. People telling me that their visas were about to expire, that they would need to part with their home, their jobs, and people who would otherwise be stateless would have nowhere else to go. Those conversations were difficult. That executive order was an insult to our values, but it's also not the first nor the last act of discrimination the people of this country have faced. And so we come to the story of the executive order issued by Franklin Delano Roosevelt that forced the incarceration of Japanese Americans. Raise your hand if you have an ancestor who is Japanese or Japanese American. What we're about to talk about is something that is a deep part of these families' experiences, but all of our experiences here as people who live in this country. And in this story, we're also going to talk about not just all of your families, but also the story of Fred Korematsu. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066. Fred Korematsu, who was 23 years old, he refused that order. Walking in the streets in San Leandro, he was stopped because of his race, he was arrested because of his national origin, and he was taken to jail. And my predecessor at the time, Ernest Bessig, the director of the ACLU, walked into that jail, shook hands with Fred Korematsu, and asked Fred, "Will you follow your first act of patriotism with a second by suing the United States government for violating your constitutional rights?" And do you know what Fred said? He said, "Of course." Let me hear you say those words. Of course. Through the course of World War II, America's soldiers sacrificed greatly. Working in alliance with other countries, the United States was able to defeat fascism. Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave us not just this executive order, he also gave us the New Deal. He also gave us Social Security. His Works Progress Administration built the Golden Gate Bridge. But among the things we were taught by Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a lesson that he himself forgot on the days after Pearl Harbor. There is nothing to fear but fear itself. The fear of the foreigner, the fear of the Japanese American, the fear of the immigrant, the fear of the Muslim. We need to reject fear and instead embrace freedom. That is the basis of this country, to embrace freedom. This is Ernest Bessig. Ernest admired this country's Constitution greatly. And he believed in our founding creed and our founding words in the Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the Bill of Rights, we have the First Amendment that provides us freedom of expression and freedom of religion. The Fourth Amendment that gives us privacy and requires a warrant. The Fifth Amendment that gives us the right to remain silent and requires the due process of law. The Sixth, which gives us the right to counsel. And the Eighth, that protects us from cruel and unusual punishment and excessive bail. But this Constitution, we all know it, was deeply flawed. It had the 3/5 clause, defining a slave as a 3/5 of a person. It had in the Constitution the requirement that a slave who had sought and fought and won their freedom would have to be returned as a fugitive slave by a state to which they had run for their freedom. 100 years passed in which women could not vote, black people could not vote, people of color could not vote, and most people without property could not vote. And we then came to the Trail of Tears and the forced relocation of Native Americans. And we also came to the Civil War. And out of that Civil War, the movement for abolition, which included also in it the movement for suffrage, striking down against race and sex, that movement led to our second founding, to a second revolution, equally important to our first. And out of that time came a new set of amendments to the Constitution. The 13th, which abolished slavery, except as punishment for crime. And the 14th Amendment, which we'll talk about more in a moment. The 15th, which struck down the prohibition on voting discrimination based on race, which was followed almost 60 or 70 years later. It took that long, after World War I, to secure the 19th Amendment, equality in voting based on sex. This altogether is the second founding. And a core component of it is the 14th Amendment. Let's spend a moment with the 14th Amendment. Section 1 of that amendment reads, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the states wherein they reside." Did you catch that? No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States. Did you catch that? And then it goes on to say, no state, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. This is a really big deal. This is the Bill of Rights, and it's had to be repeated a second time to say that every person, citizen and non-citizen alike, deserves due process and equal protection of the law and everything else that's in the Bill of Rights. And so when we think about the question of what makes me a citizen, it's the 14th Amendment of the United States that made this child, traveling this country 30,000 miles, born on its soil, a citizen of this country. But do you understand the meaning of my citizenship? What that means is that my citizenship, as an Iranian American, it's the product of the struggle of the first revolution, and more importantly, of the second revolution, of the movement of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, of the movement that abolished slavery and enshrined equality in our Constitution. That's where I draw the privileges of my citizenship. And I commit to you on this day, right now, that to the unfinished business of that second revolution, to the unfinished march in Selma, and the unfinished march of farm workers in the Central Valley, of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, that is what I am dedicating the purpose of my citizenship. My privileges and my purpose are bound together. So how do we all do that? How do we dedicate our purpose to this cause? And for that, we have the First Amendment itself, laid out for us with clues and guides for how it is we must rally our experience and our numbers right now in defense of that revolution and the second revolution. The First Amendment reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of their grievances. We have the experience, we have the numbers, so how do we use these clues for the strategy for our work going forward? First is the principle of religion, which when you go more deeply is about faith. It's about beliefs. It's about our conscience. So we have to dig deep into those reservoirs of our beliefs and apply that energy to the work ahead. Our faith in freedom is far more powerful than the threats of fear. And we're going to draw on that every single day. After that, we have the freedom of speech. In 1996, in one of my first jobs out of college, getting out the vote, I had the privilege of working with some wonderful volunteers, and one was Tiffany Hammond. She was 16 years old at the time, a United States citizen, but who could not vote. And she worked her tail off, knocking on doors and phoning. And after the election, a reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle interviewed her and asked her, "Why did you work so hard on that election?" And do you know what Tiffany said? She said, and I quote, "I didn't have the vote, but I had 1,000 votes." And that is the power of the freedom of speech that we all enjoy. Say it with me, citizen and non-citizen alike. Say it with me, citizen and non-citizen alike. And so then we go to the freedom of the press. And in this photo, we know that the press has been under attack for a very long time. Our co-sponsors of this event today, City Lights, was the target of censorship in 1957 when an ACLU attorney, Al Bendick, and a team of lawyers defended them. And so we are going to continue to defend the freedom of the press. And so then we come to the right to petition government. But this one, I'm going to make a little bit more complicated with my friend, Thomas Paine from Common Sense. Remember, he's calling for a revolution, and he attacks the idea of petitioning 5 times in his short essay. He says, "Nothing flatters vanity or confirms obstinacy in kings more than repeated petitioning." And then, just to make his point even more clear, he says, "To be always running 3,000 or 4,000 miles with a tale or a petition, waiting 4 or 5 months for an answer, which when obtained requires 5 or 6 more to explain it in, will in a few years be looked upon as folly. There was a time when it was proper, and there is a proper time for it to cease." So what does that mean for how we use our right to petition today? What it means is that we have to use every legal form of pressure and apply it at every point where pressure can be applied in the government and in every branch of government. But while we're doing that, we also have to petition the conscience of the American people, every American who loves this country dearly, which is all of us, around the concept that power is derived from the consent of the governed, and that the power of the people needs to be fully asserted, and petition the government forcefully for a redress of our grievances. We have the experience, and we have the numbers. So now let me close back to the Muslim ban. Just a few weeks ago, there are many people in this room who were affected directly by that executive order. And you will hear shortly from Hadil Al-Mowafak, who is one of the brave plaintiffs in the case that the ACLU filed here in California against the Trump executive order. Over the days in which we were preparing this case, on Tuesday night, I called Avi Rose, who's the director of Jewish Family and Community Services of the East Bay. Let's give them a hand. And this is an organization that remembers the days when Jews were turned away from this country and remembers the meaning of discrimination and persecution. And it's also a community that knows what it means to form bonds of friendship. And this organization helps to resettle refugees, including from the Middle East, including Muslims, and including from my old home country of Iran. I spoke with Avi, and immediately he said that they want to be involved. Within a day, he had spoken to our attorney, and the day after that, he had a call with his board, and they voted unanimously to join Hadil and 2 other students in filing this case with the ACLU. That Thursday night, Avi and I spoke again by phone. It was a moving conversation reflecting on the events of the past 2 days. And Avi and I closed the conversation and we were done. And Avi said to me, Abdi, there's one other question that our board had that I didn't know how to answer. I said, Avi, what is that question? They asked, of all the groups that help resettle refugees, why did you call us? And to answer that question, I reflected on a trip that I took a few years ago back to Iran. And this is a photo of me with my father. And we're standing in Persepolis, which is the ancient city of Iran. And in this photo, which I took, this is the tomb of Cyrus the Great, the ancient emperor of Iran. And a person who, if you've met any Iranian, we're pretty fond of Cyrus the Great. And I said, Avi, the Old Testament tells us that when my ancestor Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon, that he freed the Jews from their captivity, and he helped you to practice again your religion freely and to restore your temples. And now, 2,500 years later, you, the descendants of those Jews, are helping to create a home and a refuge for the descendants of Cyrus. These are the bonds of friendship. These are the bonds of humanity. These are the bonds of freedom and religious tolerance. These are bonds that we see on every continent and across centuries. And it just so happens that people came from all of those continents to this place, and the native people of this continent, and the subsequent people who have come, some by force and some by voluntarily, we have created and made this country. And those bonds of friendship, those bonds of humanity that came from all those continents and all those centuries, they came together in the form of our founding Constitution. They came together in the form of our Bill of Rights. They came together in the form of the great movements for abolition and suffrage and civil rights and equality. And that is our legacy in this room, in this assembly, in this country. And we will not give up 1 inch of that legacy. We will not give up 1 person from the protection of that Constitution, which applies, say it with me again, to all people, citizen and non-citizen alike. We have our history, we have the experience, and we have the numbers. If Thomas Paine were to look out at us right now, he would think we're pretty ready and good to go. If Fred Korematsu looked at us right now, he'd think we're pretty ready and good to go. If Ernest Bessig was in the room with us right now, he would say, we're pretty ready and we're good to go. We have the experience and we have the numbers. Now, the other side has a playbook based on fear. That's the playbook we saw in California in 1994, and it's the playbook we saw in 2016 and that we're seeing in 2017. They have a playbook based on fear, but we have a better playbook based on freedom. That playbook is the Constitution of the United States and the values for which it stands. And say it with me one more time, because it applies to all people, citizen and non-citizen alike. So that, my dear friends, when I search for the question of what is the meaning of citizenship, and more specifically, what is the meaning of this accidental citizen's citizenship, is where we finally are at the answer. The meaning of my citizenship is that it springs, my privileges of citizenship spring from the struggle of the first revolution and then the struggle to end slavery and to secure suffrage and equality for all people. And I dedicate the purpose of my citizenship to the idea that this Constitution protects us all, affirms all of our human dignity. One more time, citizen and non-citizen alike. Thank you so much for being here and for your support. Thank you. Someone's trying to start a chant, but I have the microphone. The chant they're trying to start over there was ACLU, ACLU, ACLU. Okay, great. All right. So most people who know me know that I never prepare a speech. And that's like a literal thing. Like I would be at the door right there and I'd walk on and figure out what I'm going to say. But what I want to tell you is that this speech is one that I feel I've prepared for a whole lifetime. And it's truly my honor to be in this assembly with each and every one of you, protected by the First Amendment, and we're going to use it. We're going to use that First Amendment because we have the experience and we have the numbers. And now I have the pleasure of introducing 4 people who inspire me greatly, people who are powerful in so many ways. And they're going to share with you their perspective on this day. And the first is the daughter of Fred Korematsu, my good friend, Karen Korematsu.
Thank you. Wow, this is fabulous. Thank you for participating, being civically engaged by being here. That's what an American citizen does. That's what, even if you're a citizen or a non-citizen, this is what America is about. We also call this day Day of Remembrance. When we remember history, we commemorate, we honor those, especially that were the Japanese and that Americans that were incarcerated in 1942, and also to use this day for education. Now, usually we like to learn from our lessons of history, but obviously we have a long ways to go. And I would also say to you, what does it mean to be an American? Now, you heard a little bit about my father, Fred Korematsu, who was born in Oakland, California, attended Castlemont High School. Anybody from Castlemont? and liked to do what any other American kid would like to do at being in high school. He was on the track team and the swim team and hung out with his buddies. But he also learned about the Constitution. So when I speak to students especially, I say, pay attention, because you never know when you're going to need to know your rights with regard to the Constitution. And my father thought he had civil rights. So when the executive order in 1942, 75 years ago today, was issued by President Roosevelt, who, by the way, was a Democrat, it gave the military the authority to forcibly remove anyone of Japanese ancestry up and down the West Coast. 120,000 people. It didn't matter if you were a baby, if you were infirmed in a hospital, they pulled you out. And you pulled you away from your homes. You had basically 24 hours to decide what you're going to take with you. So you can imagine you have homes, apartments, someplace to live, and you have to decide in a short period of time what you can take with you and carry in two hands. And the rest you either have to leave behind or give to a friend, hoping that they're going to hold your possessions for you. Try to sell it at maybe 10 cents on the dollar, if that. Or you have to leave it behind. And so most everyone lost everything. And then you had to report to the detention assembly center called Tan Phuran, which is now a shopping center, but was then a racetrack and the home of Seabiscuit. So there's this big, huge bronze statue of Seabiscuit, this horse, and this little plaque that said something about the Japanese Americans had to live there in horse stalls that were converted. They were just whitewashed. You had dirt on the floor, a light bulb, and a cot and a mattress stuffed with straw. And when my father ended up there after Mr. Bessick had proceeded with his bail hearing here in San Francisco, he went over to the Presidio, to a prison over there, and then they sent him over to Tan Phuran. And he laid on that cot and he said, gee, jail was a lot better than this. Because I ran into a woman several years ago when I started speaking, and she told me that she remembers as a child, her family's friends sent in cases of Clorox because it just smelled like manure. It was the bacteria. There was dysentery. I mean, we treat animals better than we treated the Japanese Americans. And there's so many layers to this story. I could be here for an hour talking to you, but I'm going to run out of time. But the point being is my father thought this was wrong. Why should he go to a prison camp when he had done nothing wrong as an American citizen? Because all due process of law was thrown out the window. No one had their day in court, no hearings, no access to an attorney. They lost everything. And he thought this was wrong. And so that's why he decided to disobey the military orders. And thanks to Mr. Bessick, who had the courage, I might add, to take my father's Supreme Court case, or take it all the way to the Supreme Court. My father thought certainly by the time it got to the Supreme Court, they would see that it was unconstitutional. But Mr. Bessick also, Abdi wouldn't tell you, was threatened with ouster by the national ACLU headquarters. Because at that time, everyone wanted to rally around the president. And you can understand that. For those of you who were around after 9/11, we all wanted to support President Bush, right? So we want to support our president. And that's what we do in this country. Now. We have to have respect for the office. So, even though my father's case was ultimately found that he had disobeyed, that he lost his case, he never gave up hope that someday that he would be able to reopen it. Almost 40 years it took. Almost 40 years. He never gave up hope. So while I'm telling students, if you really believe deep down inside, because my father thought that he was right and the government was wrong. And he wanted to reopen his case, not just to vindicate himself, but all the Japanese Americans that had been incarcerated, like his family. And also he was worried that something like this could happen again. So in 1983, the evidence was found in Washington, D.C. that proved that there was government misconduct at the time of my father's Supreme Court case, that the Department of Justice had altered evidence, destroyed evidence, and withheld evidence. And on that basis, his conviction was overturned or vacated. Now, the Supreme Court record still stands, I will need to tell you, because it can be still cited, even though it's been discredited. Some people think it's toxic, that it can't be used in another kind of executive order, but we don't know. And that's the caution. But even though my father was ostracized and vilified from his own Japanese American community for taking a stand, he welcomed them with open arms, and he crisscrossed this country to continue it with education. And in 1998, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, this country's highest civilian honor. And when he received honors, he didn't do it just for himself. He did it for all those that had been incarcerated. And the two people he wanted there that day were his parents, because he had brought shame to the family. And you can probably understand that. And so now you never know what's going to happen to someone's legacy after they pass away. My father passed away in 2005. And 6 months before he did, he gave me the charge to carry on with education and to keep telling the story, his story, and that of the Japanese American incarceration. And I thought, wow, I'm not the attorney here, but I always felt that I had that opportunity. And so in 2009, we established the Fred Korematsu Institute and developed education curriculum materials for teachers that we send out for free as a result of Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution, which is, maybe many of you don't know, is in perpetuity for the state of California. On January 30th. Did anybody see Fred Korematsu Google Doodle on January 30th? So it's also recognized in Hawaii and Florida and Virginia. It's not a national holiday yet. We're working on it. I'm sure you want another holiday. But the point being is that he represents not only Asian Americans, but our civil rights, our civil liberties, and the Constitution. The Muslim and Arab and South Asian and Sikh communities, the underserved communities. That's what Fred Korematsu represents. And that's why it's important to have that kind of day recognized. Because, he really believed that this is a great country. And now, not that we have to change it, now we have to work on making it better, for sure, to changing our attitudes and teaching respect. For some reason, we've lost a little of that. It's okay to have differences. And for students, the bullying factor that we have been experiencing in schools has got to stop. Share your stories. Share each other's stories of your families, of where you came from, of their struggles. Because maybe once you understand where your family's stories and their struggles, that you can appreciate others. So when you go away from here today, be like the pebbles in the pond. right? Don't keep this to yourselves. Share what you've learned here. This is important if we're going to work together, to be civically engaged, to participate. That's what a democracy is about. That's what citizenship is about. That's what American is being about. And to remember my father's words, to stand up for what is right. So say with me, stand up for what is right. And when you see something wrong, protest, but not with violence. Otherwise, they won't listen to you. But don't be afraid to speak up. Thank you.
So in 1994, when I was a student, and there was that governor's election that jolted a lot of us to action, I also got exposed to a whole world of social justice work in the Central Valley. And I went to a town called Kettleman City, which was targeted with a toxic waste incinerator. And the logic was they already have a toxic waste landfill, and already these people are exposed to pesticides, so this seems like the perfect place for this. And the community there was fighting back, and they were fierce. And seeing what they were able to accomplish set me on my path to become a community organizer. I'm so honored now to introduce to you our next speaker, who is Jessica Cabrera. Jessica is one of the fierce leaders of civil rights and immigrants' rights in the Central Valley today, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to work with her as we do. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much. Hi. Thank you so much. And much like Abdi, I don't prepare a speech either, so let's see how it goes. But again, my name is Jessica Cabrera Carmona, and I am such a proud Stocktonian, Central California, Central Valley person. But my journey actually begins in 1993 when I was born. I was born to a 16-year-old single mother who, by the name of Hadil Carmona, and until the age of 5, I lived in Zihuatanejo, Guerrero. In 1998, my mother and I migrated not only to seek better opportunity, but to also reunite with my grandmother who had been residing in Central California since the early 1980s. And this was a critical point where my mother was now going to be able to live and exist with her mother, right, in the same country, in the same room. So naturally, being from Central California, there's a lot of silence, and one of them is in our public schools. So as a young person, being undocumented was something I didn't talk about. Actually, in high school, I was really good friends with a group of people, and I never shared my status of being undocumented. And now, looking back and having a really good friend who's an organizer with me, we kind of joke about like, oh, we didn't know we were undocumented until college, right? So that's something we're definitely fighting together. But reflecting back in my elementary experience, being undocumented was something I didn't understand, especially since I had broken English and was in ESL courses, right? But again, being undocumented was a feeling. I knew I was different. I knew my family lived in a one-bedroom studio apartment. I knew I was different. And reflecting back now, my family silence meant huge things. One of them was a form of survival from deportation, right? So coming from Central California, there is a lot of agricultural jobs as Central California's economy is completely wrapped in onions. Stockton has a famous yellow onion, and we know Tulare County, Monterey, and Santa Cruz County harvest cherries, harvest berries. And again, so naturally after leaving high school, I was not able to find work, so I applied to this cherry factory who was hiring a lot of workers because it was the perfect time of cherries, which is around April until the first weeks of June. So I entered not knowing what to expect, but definitely expecting a lot of immigrants, correct? So I stood among 200 women in assembly lines. And as the cherries passed by each one of us, we had to sort them out between good cherries and bad cherries. And it was 17 hours of standing. It was seeing people sleep in tents in the parking lot because they couldn't commute back home, right? They would rather spend a couple hours sleeping. So it was such an immense reality for me, but also very hardship. So I found a lot of comfort in the immigrant women when we did have breaks. Some of them would joke around and say during lunchtime that they brought me an extra meal because I was too skinny and needed to gain more strength. Some of them even brought me special little coffee guayaba candies, and I grew this such sense of community with them and pride and love. And leaving the cherry season when it was over, I wanted to continue that sense of community. So I gathered all my undocumented friends, and we created a space where we were able to talk about being undocumented, but most importantly, organize. Through the last 3 years of my organizing experience, we not only organized young people, but one of my biggest accomplishments was organizing a social justice ministry in my parish, where 10 undocumented women started this leadership program as I led them, and they started being very shy and timid and not wanting to talk about their status, but eventually left this leadership program with being very undocumented and unafraid, which was amazing, and money can't buy that, right? The sense of pride and community again. And when I was able to reflect with the executive director about, wow, these women are ready to organize, let's move forward, and like the leadership, let's plan out strategy, the executive director of the organization I was working for pulled me aside and told me that the women weren't enough. He mentioned that if the priest of the parish we were working in was to take us serious, that we had to have more male members, right? So I was shocked, I was upset, and I was very startled, and I was like blown away of why was that necessary? And it clicked, right, that we're still women in a man's world. So what that came was the reality that intersectionality was very critical for the liberation of these women. So reading about intersectionality, and the founder of the word was very important to me. It was created by Kimberlyn Williams Crenshaw in 1989, who was a civil rights scholar in the movement and was very critical about talking about not just civil rights, but also the liberation of young people and the liberation of women. So I was amazed, and what does this word mean? So researching more, specifically in immigration and my reality, right, and my peers, I was able to read through the study of Black Alliance for Just Immigration, Baji, saying that undocumented immigrants from Africa and the Caribbean are twice more likely to get deported or detained. So reflecting with my peers, we realized that immigration justice was completely tied to Black liberation, right? Does anyone agree? Right. Of course. And through more research, myself and my peers were able to find that LGBTQ folks are 15 times more likely to get sexually assaulted while they're awaiting trial than their heterosexual non-transgender counterparts, which is unacceptable. It's ridiculous and more of a reality of why we need intersectionality, specifically with immigration justice, right? So reflecting on all of our identities, and again, intersectionality is social identities when they mix with systems of oppression. So we understand, an example, that the immigration justice is completely tied to criminal reform, right? The same private prisons and the same detention centers are completely owned by the same people, right? That target different groups, but again, we're all in this huddle and all intersecting in different crossways and paths. So again, I'd love to remind you that our success as people in this room, our communities, our churches, our parishes, our school, is completely tied to the liberation of one another in this room. So, yes. And before I leave, I'd love for you to take a look at your partner, whatever way you'd like. There's no rules here. Great, and look at one another, and if you're able to verbally say, I see you, right? I see you, and your fight is my fight. Great, thank you so much.
job. Thank you. Thanks. Wow. So Jessica is a seriously powerful leader, and there's so many leaders like her, but each one of us is also unique. And in this room, there's so much power. We have experience, and we have numbers. But we each also have a story that is purely and uniquely our own. And I'm so grateful to Jessica for the work she does and for her boldness and her courage. So I keep going back to those early years of the mid-1990s. We talked about 1994, and you heard me talk about 1996. It was my first job out of college, a Get Out the Vote campaign with a wonderful organization called Californians for Justice that was working side by side with the ACLU at the time. In that campaign, I met inspiring young leaders like Tiffany Hammond, if you recall, who said, I didn't have the vote, I had 1,000 votes. But I also had the privilege of working with elders in the community, and one of them is Mrs. Myrtle Braxton. And Mrs. Braxton, if you could come up to the stage.
Thank you.
Come on up to the middle. So let me tell you a little bit about Mrs. Braxton in this minuscule little story. So she was the first name on the list of people we had who had volunteered to be a precinct leader in this campaign. And I had just been trained on how do you train a precinct leader.
Yeah.
And so you have all the forms, and it says this and says the other thing, and it also includes the voter registration form. So I went to her home in Richmond, California, and we sat in the living room, and I was taking her through the packet. And she looked at me and she said, listen, baby, I've been doing this a really long time. Just tell me, what do I need to know for this one?
You
want to say something?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, I think the ACLU is doing a great job. And the video that you're going to see, they are. And at this time in our country and in our life, we need the ACLU. So each one get another one to join. The video that you're going to see, it will tell you about my life as an American citizen. I won't say my early life because some of the things are still happening. But I hope you'll enjoy it. Now we'll see the video.
And you can have a
Thank
seat.
you.
Yeah.
My name is Myrtle Braxton. I was born in Dallas, Texas in 1927. I lived in Dallas until I was 18 years old. When we left Texas, segregation was in full force. We could not ride at the front of any buses. There were theaters. There was only one theater downtown that we could go into, and then we had to sit in the balcony, the second balcony upstairs. We could not shop in the department stores, and there was just so many things, so much segregation. I remember this one trip that my mom and I took we went to California from Texas, and we got to El Paso. We had a layover between changing trains. So my mom and I decided we would go over to Juarez, Mexico. You just walk across the bridge from El Paso to Juarez. On the way back, we had to go through customs. And the custom agent asked me, what is your nationality? And I replied, Negro. He was very upset with me. He said, you are an American. That was the first time, I was 16 years old, that I had ever been told that I was an American. I also remember that when we would reach El Paso, Texas, going to California, we would change our trains there and we could sit anywhere, any coach, anywhere. When you returned to Texas, you got to El Paso, you had to get off the train, take your luggage, and go to the front of the train. As we walked to the front of the train, the Caucasian people on the train knew what was happening, that we were having to leave to go to a segregated coach. They leaned out the windows and cheered. Some of the people walking to that first part of the train were soldiers in uniform on the way back home from having fought for our country. So we were not citizens. We were citizens, but we were not allowed to be citizens, is what I think I'm trying to say. So I remember that very distinctly. Some of the things, there are many things I could tell you, but those are the things that stood out. That's the things that made me know how important it is to vote, because we could not vote. In Texas, my parents could not vote. I wasn't old enough to vote, but they could not vote. They could not register to vote. And if they had tried to register to vote, as people are aware of what happened to some people during that time, they could have been killed just trying to exercise their rights as a citizen of the United States. The first thing my father did when we got to California was register to vote. And he insisted that I vote. And he would remind me when it was time to vote. Every election, not just presidential, every election. I became involved in civil rights and in general, in public things that were happening in the public to our people, my people. I can remember going door to door to get people to sign a petition because of something that was happening at the Berkeley school system. We wanted to be able to have all kids have equal education, which is something we did not have, even in California. We had segregated schools. And as a result of all of this, it wasn't just black people alone. It was a combination of people. There were Asians, there were white people, there were all kinds of people that participated in this. Berkeley was the first place and probably the only place that did complete integration. Everybody who went to school in Berkeley was bused, not just some kids. We would start chanting, tear it down, and eventually they did. And it is a beautiful school, a beautiful new school. And a lot of people don't know that's how we got that school, is because of the fact we were involved. When we met the meetings, and I worked, and I was involved in my church, but I still had time to go to meetings to get things done. So this is how you do it. You know, sometimes you have to march, sometimes you have to go to city council and go up front and complain, and we do that too. But I didn't realize that presidents could do horrible things with executive orders. I realized that after I thought about it, is that President Roosevelt took all of the Japanese by executive order. It wasn't a law, it wasn't a Congress, it was one person could move out all these people into an internment camp. And I think about that now, and I think about, oh, this is very dangerous, that one person can have that kind of power. But I remember when the Japanese were finally released from these internment camps, some of them came to work at Social Security, where I worked. And these two young girls needed to go down Market Street to pick up their last check from having worked in the internment camp. And they were afraid to walk down Market Street. So they asked me to walk down there with them to pick up their check. And I remember this, and this is, you know, one of the things that I think about. So as I said, at my age, I've seen a lot of things. I've seen things that's happened here in California. Is one of the reasons why I stay involved. I'm still involved, and that's why I'm involved, because of the fact that we have to fight for everything we get. I'm all finished. Thank you.
Braxton, you got to stand.
Oh dear. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, she really is quite impressive. You know, Mrs. Braxton talked about the train from Texas to California and how as you pass from a border to a border, people's status would change. And this is United States citizens. And this is, mind you, after the 14th Amendment. I mean, could the 14th Amendment have been any more clear? I mean, really? I mean, please, like, could the Bill of Rights have been more clear? And so to the people who say, let's interpret the Constitution the way the founders interpreted it. Oh my God, like, why would you do that? I mean, honestly, like, do you think Thomas Jefferson, who was one of the most learned people of his time, if he was around now, he would have stopped reading a single new book? Like, really? Do you think Thomas Jefferson would limit his understanding of the Constitution to his understanding of the Constitution? Do you think Benjamin Franklin, one of the greatest inventors of all time, would have stopped innovating? So when you think about the Constitution and its story, Mrs. Braxton's story means so much. Because after Reconstruction, we had almost a century of Jim Crow. And that's where we had the third American Revolution. And that was the revolution in knocking on doors in Mississippi, marching across Selma, and the farm workers' marches, the women's movement, and the LGBT movement, and Ed Roberts and the disability rights movement, all of that together, that is the third founding of the United States of America. Like when the confirmation hearings happen for the Supreme Court justice, and if they talk about like interpreting the Constitution like the founders, I don't know what I'm going to do. It's like, let's respect the founders. Really, let's respect the founders, but let's not limit ourselves just to what they knew when they knew it. Which brings us to today. I'm so honored now to introduce Hadil Al-Mowafak. Now, anyone in this room speak Arabic or Persian? So the word Mowafak means successful one. I don't think our attorneys knew that when they spoke with Hadil. And so what's the case called? Is it Hadil Al-Mowafak et al. Versus Trump? So it's a good omen. So I am now honored to introduce Hadil Al-Mowafak, who is the plaintiff in one of the many cases filed not just by the ACLU, but many civil rights organizations throughout the country, challenging this unconstitutional executive order of the Muslim ban. Hadil.
Thank you, Abdi. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am delighted to be joining you here tonight on this special event. What a marvelous audience. Well, I am Hadil Al-Mowafak, student from Yemen, and I am a plaintiff on the ACLU lawsuit against the executive order banning people from 7 Muslim-majority countries. We've been hearing a lot about the legal side of the executive order. Today, I'll guide you through what it means to be one of the persons affected directly by this ban through telling my own story. So I come from Yemen, this really beautiful place. And this fine-looking man is my husband. His name is Murad Zubair. On March 22, 2012, I met Murad while he was painting graffiti on the street. Magic sparked. We fell in love. And 4 years later, we got married. When the war broke out in Yemen in 2015, I started working on documenting human rights violations. And that gave me a new sense of purpose to study law and become a human rights lawyer. On March 25th, 2016, I received my admission letter from Stanford. I got accepted. At that time, I didn't know how to feel. Should I feel happy because I just got accepted into one of the world's leading universities? Or should I feel sad because I knew that I'm gonna be staying away from my husband for a whole year? And when you're living in a war-torn country, such as Yemen, you didn't get to have many opportunities. So the decision that we took was not at all an easy one. It was especially hard for me because when I left Yemen, it no longer looked like this, but like that. On July 17th, I traveled to another country to obtain a US visa because I couldn't obtain it in Yemen due to the war. It was then that I started counting down the days until I go home to my husband and family. At that time, I had 11 months left until I go home. On September 17th, I arrived at Stanford. 9 more months, and I'll be home. I finished full quarter. 6 more months until I get home. Whenever my friends will ask me about my summer plans, my answer is always the same. I will go home. However, on January 27th, I heard about the ban. I received the news in disbelief. But people were detained at airports. They were denied entry to the US, and protests were everywhere. It was real. January 27th, I no longer know when I'm coming back home. I've heard many people say that the ban will not cause much harm since it's only temporary, and that people who are affected by it should just wait until the ban is over for the sake of national security. Well, I understand the concern of those people for the security of their country. It is a legitimate concern. But what I'm struggling to understand is that how could a ban based on hate and discrimination protect Americans from anything at all? I wonder if they realize the damages that caused by this ban goes beyond the legal dimension. People who are affected by this ban and people who are likely to be affected by similar future resolutions are living in fear and uncertainty. The rights of those who come here to study, who come here to work, of those who live here and call this country their home, are subject to restriction and suspension at any future moment and without prior notice. Now, when I came here, when I left my husband and family 6 months ago to go to college, I did not imagine that I might not be able to see them for 4 years, or maybe more, if I decide to pursue a law degree. My husband, of course, is assuring me that we're gonna get through this, that everything is going to be okay. But it is hard to live like this. It is not right. I think that one of the greatest harms of this ban is that it instills fear in people. Fear of those who don't look like us, fear of those who don't speak our language, fear of those whose values we don't understand, and fear of difference. The difference that was a source of strength is now a source of weakness. And the difference that used to be celebrated is now being frowned upon. Now fear has come to replace the openness and acceptance, and hate has come to replace tolerance, but that cannot be right. Coming from Yemen, I get to proudly consider myself among the revolutionary generation. If the Arab Spring taught us anything at all, that would be how important it is to say no to injustice and to how to stand against what's wrong before it's too late and before too many wrongs accumulate. It was the silence of the generation before us that made our countries what they are today. So, when the ACLU contacted me regarding the lawsuit, I already knew what my answer is going to be. Yes, I'm going to stand against what's wrong. But choosing to resist is not an easy road. Choosing to speak up, to take an action, and to get out of our comfort zone is not an easy way, but it is the right way. I believe that the first step to resistance is to dispose of this fear inside of us and to find that one thing that keeps us going on. For me, what keeps me strong is knowing that people in Yemen are laughing and resisting as they navigate each day under the war, and knowing that my husband, of whom I drew so much inspiration, is resisting in his own way back home. So tell me, can you think of something that's inspiring you to keep going? Before I end my speech, I just want us all to remember that every dark cloud has a silver lining. And those are you. Those are everyone who's choosing to resist when it's neither favorable or comfortable. So thank you for your support. Thank you for being courageous. You are standing on the right side of history. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the publisher and executive director of City Lights Books, Elaine Katzenberger.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. It's a privilege and an honor to work with the ACLU and Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, such great collaborators. This evening or this afternoon is the result of some initial brainstorming that happened immediately after the election. The ACLU was one of the first calls I made. I already knew Abdi, and although, of course, the ACLU is a very busy organization, my only question was, how do I help? How do we help? What should we do as an organization? How can we collaborate? So this is only the beginning of what I hope will be many afternoons and evenings of inspiring and galvanizing events that help us to find a way and to find each other. It's the anniversary of the trial in which the ACLU represented Lawrence Ferlinghetti when he wanted to publish Howl, the poem by Allen Ginsberg. Our connection with the ACLU goes all the way back to 1957. So City Lights since then has been known as a champion of free speech, and we have all of that really for that we have the ACLU to thank. Since then, our organization continues to try to defend and champion the voices of those who usually don't get heard. City Lights has always been a sanctuary place. It's a place that many people feel at home in. And coming to an event like this, it's an opportunity for all of us to feel at home. We all need each other, and we need spaces where we can find each other. So, keep on coming to things like this. Come to the bookstore. One of the things that City Lights also stands for is the power of literature and poetry. You don't just have to read nonfiction. You should know the history, and you should know the political science, and that's how you're empowered, but you're also empowered by the stories of other people and by the poets. The poets know how to speak about these things. So I'm here to introduce the last person on our program. One of the proudest moments of my recent history at City Lights was in 2015 when I published the new poet laureate of the United States, Juan Felipe Herrera. Juan Felipe is the son of undocumented migrant workers. It was such a proud moment when the Library of Congress called me to say the next poet laureate is going to be Juan Felipe Herrera. So powerful. It's a beautiful story about where poetry can bring someone and what it means to be an American. Which brings us to our next person, Diana Gameros. Singer, songwriter, activist, and teacher, Diana Gameros is from Ciudad Juárez. Diana spent most of her childhood there, and it's where her family still lives. Born into a musical family, Diana grew up surrounded by traditional Mexican songs about love and revolution. She came to the United States as a teenager with dreams of becoming a professional musician. After falling in love with a young man from Michigan, of all places, she moved to Grand Rapids, where she lived as an undocumented immigrant, enrolling in Grand Rapids Community College to study piano and recording technology. For 4 years, she worked long hours to support her studies, and she is the first in her family to receive a formal musical education. When Gameros came to the Bay Area in 2008, she gave herself 1 month to land a steady gig, and she found a weekend stage at Roosevelt Tamale Parlor on 24th Street in the Mission. But after just a few years in San Francisco, Diana's talent and versatility as a performer brought her a steady stream of gigs at venues both small and large, including such notable venues as the Herbst Theater, Brava, Yoshi's, the SF Jazz Center, Freight and Salvage, and most recently, Davies Symphony Hall. In 2013, Diana released her first album entitled Eterno Retorno, Eternal Return, a soulful retrospective of her journey as an immigrant. In October of the following year, she received the Emerging Leader Award from the Chicana Latina Foundation for her work in music and social justice activism. Diana's songs and story have been featured on NPR's All Songs Considered, Public Radio International The World, and the PBS NewsHour website. Diana is currently working on writing the music for her second album. Even as she continues her musical journey, Gameros inspires her community as an activist promoting social justice and global awareness. She credits her growing success to an I've got nothing to lose attitude, nonstop performing, and a deep gratitude for the opportunities she's found in the United States, despite a challenging year-long struggle for legal immigration status. Years long. For many years, Gameros was unable to travel freely and visit her family in Mexico, lest she risk never being able to return to the US. In 2014, she at last received an immigration visa and is on the path to American citizenship. Please welcome Diana Gameros.
Thank you. It's a true honor to be here. And the first song I want to share with you is a song made up of just questions that came out of my need for home, for wisdom, and for forgiveness. How can I make life last? How can I dissolve all borders? How can I make my land forgive me? How can I make her garden flourish again? And although I know that we may not have answers to all the questions we ask on our quest for freedom, I truly believe that asking those questions is the very first step towards being free. This is called Como Hacer. ¿Cómo hacer que la vida perdure? Nada ni nadie escasee. Si nadie es eterno, nada es nuestro. ¿Cómo hacer que el que camina vuele? ¿Cómo hacer que las fronteras se evaporen? Y caminar sin prisa al hogar, sin miedo llegar. ¿Cómo hacer que mi tierra me perdone? ¿Cómo hacer para que su jardín ya vuelva a florecer? Y hacerle saber que lejos duele. Decirle también que vivo por volver a verle. ¿Cómo hacer que la vida perdure? Gracias. Thank you. Thank you. In 2010, Senate Bill 1070 was passed in Arizona, and this was, at the time, this was one of the toughest anti-immigration laws ever passed. Although, fast forward 7 years, and we are now confronted with new anti-immigration orders and actions. So, on this day, I want to dedicate this closing song of hope and resilience to all those who embark on a journey to a safer and a brighter future. And also to all the people and to all the organizations like ACLU that work tirelessly and fearlessly to protect our freedom. And I pray that all those who are already free and safe can keep their minds and their hearts open to welcome, to support, to celebrate, and to love those who are still on the journey. Thank you so much. This is called SB 1070. dejas, ese que no dejas respirar, ese que mareas, ese que me desesperas, ese que me avientas a ningún lugar. Viento de la vida, dime que es normal. Viento de la vida, donde puedo cobijar mis miedos. Viento de la vida, cuánto hay que esperar. Viento de la vida, cómo desentumecer mis dedos. Y estos dos brazos que tengo yo para pelear, aunque no quiero. ¿Dónde esconderme? ¿A dónde ir? Porque habré de escapar así sin más, sin antes avisarle al mundo que no es por ser cobarde. No es por falta de razón que me quiera yo escapar de este vendaval que avieja y no me deja viento de la vida, dime que es normal. Viento de la vida, donde puedo cobijar mis miedos. Viento de la vida, cuánto hay que esperar. Viento de la vida, cómo desentumecer mis dedos. Estos dos brazos que tengo yo para pelear, aunque no quiero. Ese dueles, ese asustas, ese eructas, ese escucha. No quiero esconderme más de ti. Ya no existe el miedo escapa y en las manos abundancia y al final de este camino cada paso ha valido. Ya no existe el miedo escapa y en las manos abundancia y al fin Gracias. Thank you so much. Gracias.
We're going to let Mrs. Braxton go first.
And I think I want to invite everybody to come up to the stage. Thank you so much, everyone.
Wow. Mrs. Braxton, you can sit. You don't want to? Okay. All right. Wow. 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 Well, Diana, that music was just haunting and so beautiful, and thank you very much for everything that you do. We're just going to wrap up now with a little closing, and as you can see behind us are the words, taking action. And I just want to say, earlier Mrs. Braxton talked about being on a train from Texas to California and how as you pass through those borders, your status as a citizen, your status as a person would change. And if any of us were to get on a train today to go from California, say, to Florida, the same thing would happen. State by state, our status changes. And we've worked hard to turn California around, where we went from a state that sought to deny public education in Proposition 187 to all children who are undocumented immigrants, to now providing college access and financial aid because we know that we will benefit from that education for all people. But when you leave California now and you pass through Arizona, as Diana's song was about, the status of a non-citizen changes dramatically, and it's going to get pretty bad in the new situation that we're facing. When you pass through Texas, your status changes. And while we may have marriage equality coast to coast, in many parts of the country, a private employer can fire someone for being gay or lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. And so when we're on that train right now, not just when you were 18 years old, our status changes. And when you get to the state of Florida, for example, if you have a felony on your record in this state, if you've completed your prison term and parole, you can vote. And we've worked very hard to make that abundantly clear. The whole 8 years I've been at the ACLU, we've been trying real hard to contain felony disenfranchisement just to that, prison and parole. But if that same citizen of this country, who now has their right to vote restored in this state, takes that train from California to Florida today, just like your father, as they pass between states, they would lose that right to vote, because many states still to this day, if you have a record, you've served your time, you will be denied the right to vote for life. And so that's where I want to talk about our responsibility in California. And when we take action, we have to take action to protect our rights and our communities in this state. But we're part of the United States of America. And Californians, we have to embrace all of our fellow Americans. Say it with me. Citizen and non-citizen alike in the defense of liberty and freedom and justice. So when we talk about taking action today, I want you to think expansively about the scope of the action that's required of us in this country. And I want to tell you a story back to Al Bendick, who was the attorney who brought the Howell case in 1957. And I'm looking right now at his family, who are seated here with us. In 1957, in addition to the censorship of City Lights bookstore, there was something else happening in this country called the House Un-American Activities Committee, which traveled the country just destroying people's lives. And the House Un-American Activities Committee also came to California and had hearings for a different fear. It wasn't the fear of the immigrant, the fear of the Muslim. At that time, it was the fear of the communist. And based on that fear, they destroyed the principles of freedom in so many people's lives. That was the House Un-American Activities Committee. And they subpoenaed a large number of people. And I'm going to read you now a quote from Al Bendick, who was our one lawyer in 1957, talking about the people who were being subpoenaed. And he said, quote, "And a lot of them came to the ACLU and asked to be represented. And of course, we offered to represent them. But there was only me as staff counsel, and I could not represent everyone. We went around trying to find volunteer attorneys. There was a young attorney who worked in the Mills College Law Library, where I used to go to do my research. And we became friendly. And his name was George Moscone." And later, he became mayor of San Francisco. And I asked him if he would volunteer. And he said, just like Fred Korematsu said, just like Hadil Al-Mowafak said, of course. And so I ask you now, will you commit to do your part to continue this journey of justice? What is your answer? Let me hear you louder than that. Let me hear it loud enough so it rings all the way to the great state of Florida. All right, so we're going to do our part. So now we're talking about taking action, and there's so many different ways of taking action. And I just want to highlight a few themes. This is not like a section, like a work planning conversation. But I want you to leave here with a commitment to devoting your time, your talent, your experience, and your numbers to the cause of protecting the revolution that Thomas Paine called for, and protecting it with the same fierce urgency that he called it into being back when he did. Can I get you to commit to that? All right. So here's some levels of engagement. One is we're going to work with all 50 states and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico and every other territory where the United States Constitution applies. And the ACLU does not deal with planet Earth, but there are many other organizations that do, and I'd encourage you to consider supporting some of those. And while you do support the ACLU, we also encourage you to support and be a part of some of the local organizations in your community and support those groups too, because we're part of an ecosystem that needs to thrive. So here's some themes. The first level is at the level of community. We need to reach out to our neighbors, and we need to reach out to communities like the Central Valley and other places where we have to maybe go on some road trips. We need to knock on doors and talk to people about what? That the Constitution applies to who? To all people, citizens and non-citizens alike, okay? We got that message today. We're going to spread that message in all of our communities. Second, we're going to work at the level of local government, school districts, city councils, county boards of supervisors, elected sheriffs, elected prosecutors. All the branches of local government have a role to play in either pursuing the policies of fear or turning to the playbook of freedom. And we're going to press every branch of local government in our communities to choose freedom over fear. And that's what we can do in our local governments. The next level up is state. And in our state, we have some seriously strong leaders. I'm so grateful to our governor and to our legislative leaders for the stand they've taken, not just on civil liberties, but also on climate, on the environment, on healthcare, and so many important issues. At the state level, we will be pressing compelling and critically important bills, several of which deal with resisting what the federal government will try to do within the bounds of the Constitution, which does not compel a state to follow the lead of the federal government in the business that is not the state's business. So we're working within the Constitution, within the separation of powers, within the authority of the state of California to choose how we deal with our own people in their education, healthcare, and public safety. In addition to some bills that are going to be dealing with these things of the federal government, there's another bill that's a big priority of mine, which is one of those injustices that's just been there a really long time. And it didn't take a candidate for president to propose it for it to be wrong. And this is the issue of money bail. It's been here a very long time. It goes back a really long time through English common law. And when Alexis de Tocqueville traveled this country in the 1830s, I read Democracy in America last year because of Al Bendick, the attorney we spoke about. Alexis de Tocqueville was criticizing money bail. That was in the 1830s, okay? So we're going to work really hard to try to end money bail in California. And replace it with something that upholds public safety but doesn't create racial and economic inequality. And I was so stunned to learn about Fred Korematsu having been denied bail when he was arrested in San Francisco. So we're also honoring Fred with that campaign. Then we go up to the federal level, and we're dealing with Congress, with the United States Senate, with the House of Representatives, with the executive agencies and the executive branch, and we're going to work really hard. And this is where the Central Valley comes in, because the legislators there need to hear from us just as much as Congresswoman Barbara Lee in my district or Minority Leader Pelosi needs to hear from us. And we're going to be doing that throughout the United States. And then there is the final stopgap, which is going to court. And that is a form of petitioning the government through the judicial branch and the importance of an independent judiciary. Not so-called judges, but independent judiciary, just like we have an independent press. So those are some of the outlines of the path. Every person in this room brings to it experience and numbers. And we're going to need all of you, all of your talent and energy for the work that's ahead. So with that, I want to also acknowledge that so many of you in this room have your own stories, and we could only hear today from a few of us. We will have a reception shortly, and so we encourage you to join us in that reception. One of the people who is here is the son of George Moscone. John Moscone works for Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, and is one of the many, many talented people of Yerba Buena Center for the Arts that made this event possible. So let's give YBCA a big, big round of applause. I mean, these people have some serious experience, I'll just say, and numbers. And I want to thank again City Lights and the collaborations that are ahead in our partnership that has lasted already so long. And the volunteers and staff who made this event possible. I am truly, truly grateful to all of them. This whole event was put together in 2 weeks by a wonderful, wonderful friend of the ACLU named Cole Kravitz, who deserves a special word of gratitude, along with all of the ACLU staff who made this event possible. So are we fired up? Yeah. Are we ready to go? Yeah. Are we fired up? Yeah. Are we ready to go? Yeah. All right. So now you get to go upstairs to the upper balcony where we'll have a reception and there's wonderful food. And let's share each other's stories, share each other's commitments, because what do we have? Experience and numbers. Let's get to work. Thank you all.